All right, as you guys work on research, you need to make sure that you are finding good sources, good quality sources, and being able to evaluate the sources to even know if they are credible for you to use or if they're just something you just need to throw out. So let's go through how to find and evaluate the sources that you can use, not necessarily just for this current research paper, but also for papers that you'll write in so many different classes, or even to help you try to evaluate something that you saw on TikTok or on Facebook or whatever. So let's look at finding and evaluating sources. And this will, like I said, this will also help you with, even if you see something online and you're like, I don't know, is that true or not? This will help you determine, if something's factual. So the different topics that we will go through with this are finding sources, finding library sources, finding internet sources. Just because maneuvering those can be different. And then also evaluating print sources and evaluating internet sources, and also helping you avoid bias, which is a very important thing. So finding sources. So research means to collect information, and this information can be print or electronic. Electronic can actually also include videos, interviews that you have heard. I've even had kids, use, social media or TikTok or whatever for sources, not for a research paper like this, but for another kind of project that we did. So these can come from magazines, newspapers, books, journals, other sources. And actually, you could have credible sources on social media. Again, that'll depend on on the evaluation of them and how all that turns out. So one thing that I want you guys to think about, the most important factor in research is finding high quality sources that support your argument. So if it does not support your argument of what you're trying to say, then what's the point of even having it, right? And also, if they aren't high quality sources, then that makes your argument super weak. So finding library sources. The library contains both print and electronic sources and it has some that you can't get anywhere else. So if you've ever looked online at the, for sources for something, or like the card catalog, a lot of them you can't find on the internet, that you have to get them from a library. So information found in the library is reliable. High quality scholarly sources are there, and everything that's in the library has been evaluated by professional librarians. And just so you know, like, you can get a degree in library stuff. So like, even my sister has a degree in library sciences. She has her master's in that. So, librarians take that stuff very seriously to make sure that you guys are getting good quality, even just leisurely books to read, but also resources. Also in the library, you have an online catalog. So this lists, books, journals, all different kinds of things. You can search for keywords related to that topic. And nowadays that you can actually visit the library, quote, visit it virtually online. And like for, Central Arkansas, I believe it's CALS.org. So there's also electronic database where they have collections of digital information that you can access, again, with keywords. They have specialized reference works and encyclopedias, and they can give you detailed information on specific topics. They also have references. So they are sources of accurate and reliable information, and they can have these in either print or electronic versions. And they also have general encyclopedias, and they provide general information on a whole bunch of different topics, but they give you more of a broad overview of the topic, and they don't necessarily always provide you enough in-depth research and information for like college level work. So true facts. 62% of adults get their news from social media. So Don't be that person. And I know it's really hard because with how much time all of us spend on social media, just being bombarded by all that information. But always stop and check the validity of the things and broaden your horizons. Go somewhere else besides social media for news. So finding internet sources, it's super easy, and Google is absolutely amazing. You have the world at your fingertips with information, and it's just a vast amount of information, and you don't even have to get out of bed to even look it up. So using the internet is a very popular source for students and for people who just want to Google whatever. But there is a problem. Anyone can publish on the internet. So you have to make sure that the information you find is trustworthy, that it's timely, like it's not, 1,000 years old information, and it's also authoritative. So we will talk about how you can figure all that out if it's those three things. So as always with the internet, approach everything on there with caution. You never know what is true and what is not. I've seen the meme where you don't believe everything you read on the internet, and Abe Lincoln is the one that said it. So if you don't get that, then you need to look at the dates from when Abe Lincoln lived and when the internet was invented. So even if you use search engines like Google Scholar, sometimes it doesn't always give you 100% great results, but Google Scholar is pretty amazing. I am a big fan of that. So other issues with internet sources, sometimes like, oh, you have to pay to look at it, or it's not current. They might give you something, say it's the topic is about AIDS, and they have a article that's 40 years old, and someone's trying to use that as a resource. Well, the knowledge that we have about AIDS now is vastly different than it was 40 years ago. So you have to make sure something like that is current. Also, they may appear scholarly, but they might not be authoritative. So that's just something that you have to pay attention to. Using different search engines, obviously those are to help you retrieve information and like get a whole bunch of responses all at once from whatever your search topic is. The advantage is that it's basically like casting out a huge net into the ocean. You bring in a whole bunch of fish, right? But the problem is you might get some like seaweed in with that fish or something. So you can get a whole bunch of stuff that you don't need, and that's irrelevant. So let's look at evaluating sources, like the steps that you need to look at, or like more like the criteria of what you need to pay attention to. So there are 6 things that you need to pay attention to when evaluating. So you need to look at the accuracy, the credibility, objectivity, authority, currency, and comprehensiveness. So we'll talk in just a minute on each of those so you can see what all of those entail, or maybe what they mean if you aren't sure about that. So accuracy, it just does exactly what it says. It defines whether a source is accurate or not, and you can tell if it's accurate if it is free of errors. So that can be factual errors, or it can also mean oftentimes like spelling and grammar errors. Usually something that is produced by an authoritative source will have vast amounts of, we call Q&A, so quality assurance, steps to go through to make sure there are no typos or anything before it gets published on the internet. I still find them whenever I'm looking at stuff, and I found one on a website yesterday, and it was from an authoritative source. So it does happen. I find typos in my stuff all the time. But it's just one thing that you make sure that you pay attention to. So there are different parts of accuracy. So one thing is comparing the information in one source to others. Okay, are the facts that are coming out of this the same? Look at the citations. Check the citations for information that they talk about. This helps you kind of verify the quality, and also lets you see if the author, looked at certain references and sources, or if they just were like, hey, this is what I think, versus actually using, facts. Also, you need to look at the legitimacy of the sources. So, or at the sources that the author cites, look at them. Are they just looking at other people's blogs that someone wrote or something like that? I wouldn't consider that a legitimate source, because largely those are based off of someone's opinion. So, but if they are referencing, scientific studies or, something authoritative, then that would definitely make it more legit. And also, again, errors, like I mentioned a minute ago, if the source contains factual errors or spelling grammar mistakes, that's that's definitely a red flag. If they might have one, grammar mistake, or it might be 100 grammar mistakes and factual errors, and that's definitely a red flag. Credibility. So a source is credible when it is believable. So for sources, for print sources, so they're a little bit different between print and internet sources. So look at the print sources first. So for a print source to be credible, you need to make sure that first of all, determine where the book or the article was published. So if it was published by university press, then that usually means that the book was peer reviewed or it was read by experts in the field, and they help make sure everything in there is valid and accurate. If it is published by commercial press, that usually means that you need to consider the author's reputation, when it was published, and other information to verify the quality. If it's a high-level popular magazine, some of those are written by experts, and I give some examples there, The Atlantic and The Economist. But then you also have lower-level popular magazines. They're easy to understand, but they aren't really suitable sources for research, so like People Magazine. And also a scholar journal. It's aimed at experts in a particular field. It's typically well-documented, it's peer-reviewed, and it's written by experts. And so that's definitely the kind of stuff that you can pull up from Google Scholar. They are scholarly articles or journals or whatever that have been written, and they're usually pretty solid sources. Internet sources. So, like we said earlier, don't automatically believe what you find on the internet. Things that you need to look at. Does the site list authors, directors, or editors? Is the site refereed? Does it have a panel of experts or an advisory board that decides what actually goes on there and is published? Again, are there errors in grammar, etc.? Is there an organization that is sponsoring the site? Is the organization reputable? So those are all different things that you need to look at. One thing that students always ask me about is Wikipedia. And they say, well, they look at Wikipedia and they fix things if they're wrong. And I'm like, yeah, well, but it just depends on when that particular article goes and gets reviewed. I can go on and edit something on Wikipedia right now, and who knows how long it takes until they get to it. So, for any research paper, unless your instructor tells you otherwise, Wikipedia is a no-go. All right, next one is objectivity. So a source is objective when it's not unduly influenced by personal opinions or feelings. So it's not biased, basically. So, but one thing about bias to know is bias exists. It happens whether an author tries very, very hard not to include their own perspective or viewpoint. In some way, shape, or form, it is going to come out, and that's okay. But the depth and to what length the bias exists, that is more of what is the issue. Also look at the language. So check for word choices that are kind of like slanted language, or look at points to see if the argument is one-sided or balanced, because you might notice some words might have more negative connotations about one side versus the other. So a lot of times that is, those words are chosen specifically, and they exactly know what kinds of words they are choosing, and they might have, certain, like, one fact, but then lead you with a lot of other emotional words and language, and to just try to manipulate the argument. So you also need to look at, is it justified by the facts? Or is everything that's being presented the result of emotion or preconceived ideas? So are they totally just ignoring the facts at play and just keep spouting their opinion, which is not based on facts? So that's one thing you need to look at. And also, you need to pay attention and keep an eye out for propaganda. So ask if you are being offered a legitimate point of view, or if you're being fed propaganda. All right, currency. This has nothing to do with money. It has to do with time. So a source is current is when it is up to date. So and it can differ a little bit depending on the field. So in science specifically, how current a source is uber important. It has to be current, and current would be typically, good rule of thumb is within the past 10 years. If it's older than 10 years, that's a no. I've heard even some say 7 years, but just, a rough rule of thumb is 10 years. Older sources may be out of date with information. So, like when I referenced earlier AIDS, what we know now is vastly different. I'm sure you can think of, if you're trying to look at a source from 15 years ago and talk about the coronavirus, you'll get information about the coronavirus, but from the family of viruses, not about specifically COVID-19, which might be what you're looking for. So all of that information will, definitely be important, and to have it up to date. So you want to make sure with science, if you have any kind of sciencey type topic, that you have the most up-to-date info. And other source types from other fields, so like literature, history, etc. Typically, the source information about history doesn't change, right? Because it's already happened. They're just retelling things that happened. Now, there might be something that comes out about, we thought blah, blah, blah for a long time, and we found out, this isn't true. Like, I was going to say like Pluto not being a planet and being a star, but that goes with science. But you get the gist. So the age of the source might not be as important as in the sciences. So literature, all of that, the age doesn't count. There are sometimes foundational texts that are always important and should always be included and built upon. So those are things that are always pretty important in the currency for sources, to make sure, like having literature in there and the history, those are all fine usually to have. Comprehensiveness. So a source is comprehensive when it covers a subject in sufficient depth. So to see if something is comprehensive, you need to ask these different questions. So does the source deal specifically with your subject? Does it treat the subject only briefly? Like, it probably won't be useful. So those things you need to look at. Does it treat your subject with enough detail? Does the source include background information that you need to understand? Does the source mention other sources on the subject? Like specifically for a book, they might mention other ones. For web sources, they will have a link. Are facts and interpretations supported by other sources you have read, or are there major points of disagreement? Does the author include documentation? Okay, you tell us this is what you think. Well, how do I know that that's accurate? So oftentimes, especially like if you look at, Fox or CNN or BBC or whatever, if there's an article you're reading, say it's about COVID-19, a lot of times if you scroll down to the very, very bottom, it will give you the source information. The same thing if you look at WebMD or the Mayo Clinic or something like that, something reputable. If you scroll down to the very bottom, it will have will have citations for all of the sources. Authority. So a print source, or even just actually a regular source, has authority when a writer has the expertise to write about a subject. So these are things where you have to think about the author. So one big thing that I say that people need to shy away from when they are doing research is blogs or just like websites somebody has created on their own. It's not like an official source of information or an official website or something like that. A blog, I can set up a blog and write about whatever I think about something. That doesn't make it factual. So, especially with, and I've seen that a lot with the pandemic, all of that people, well, this is what I read and this is what I think, and here is my information to back me up. And then they will post that on social media. And then I'll look at the source, and it's a blog somebody wrote. And actually I read one that, someone, and there's this huge discussion on social media, and it was something to do with COVID. I don't remember what it was specifically, and it was this blog that they had referenced, and she's writing, this lady, Dr. So-and-so. And then I looked, and she has I think a degree in piano and another in education. So nothing science related. So, that's wonderful that she has those degrees and that she has these strong opinions, but that is not, her background is not in science. So she is not an authority on the specific subject matter. So those are things that you just kind of need to be careful of and watch out for. So first bullet point, always try to determine if the author is a recognized authority or simply a person who's just decided to write about it, like I just said. What other books or articles has the author written? Do they have like a certain academic affiliation? Are they respected among other scholars? If it's a website, look at the About the Author thing and just see about them. What do the links on the website show? Do they lead to other reputable sites, or are they just other, sites with like hidden agendas or whatever? Is the site a serious publication? Does it include information that allows you to judge its legitimacy? Can you determine if the site is a domain of an individual or a group of people? Does it have a sponsor? Is the sponsor reputable? Those are all things you need to pay attention to. So remember, when you're evaluating sources, so your credibility depends on your sources. So, you can't say, well, this paper was bad because of these sources. You're the one that's choosing the sources. I'm not choosing them, and they're not being chosen for you. So your credibility in how you choose things, and even if it's not even our paper, if you are posting something on social media and you cite a source that's not a solid source, then that makes your credibility not look as solid. Also, your paper is only as strong as your sources. So if you've got good, solid sources, then that will totally back up everything you're saying in your paper. And also, you are responsible for making sure your sources are high quality. So it's kind of like lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink kind of thing. So you need to make sure that you are the one choosing the sources and making sure they are what you need to make your paper, whether it be this paper or whatever else it is that you need it for, to make sure that they are backed up properly.